Wix Studio, one end-to-end web creation platform for your agency to deliver exceptional work with absolute efficiency.
This is you without Collaborator. Invisible, just another seagull. And this is you with Collaborator. Get noticed in the AI era.
Online visibility is not luck, it's a strategy. Combine SEO, digital PR, and content distribution to grow. Visit adz.com to learn more.
Hello. I'm going to talk a bit today about how generative search is changing user behaviour and how we can ensure our brands still drive visibility. Now, I'm conscious Jack has just given me a really nice introduction, but I'm also conscious our head of marketing sat just here, so I probably do need to say a little bit around who IDHL are. This is our Pretty Leads office. We've got a leaf wall, which is pretty cool, but we've got about 400 experts as well who help our clients drive growth online. And my role is really kind of focused around supporting our search teams. We have around 100 people in SEO driving growth for these kind of businesses. So really kind of where I wanted to start today was actually focusing on how information is surfaced to our audiences, because ultimately what influences the behaviour is how they see that information in the first place. So for almost 2 decades, we're really kind of defined by a structure of 10 blue links. And over the last kind of 5-10 years, I'd say that's really started to change in terms of how information evolves to intent. So if we use something like a local modifier, like near me, what you'll see is it's not only the blue links which evolve to that intent, i.e. having localized results, but the SERP itself will evolve to that intent. And we'll see that with all different types of SERP features, that not only the results are a reflection of intent, but the SERP is a reflection of that intent as well. And we're now entering into a changing area of answer engines. And generative search and agentic search and answer engines, whatever you want to kind of call this, is massively impacting the expectations of our audiences. And that kind of change of expectation fundamentally comes from a place of I do the work, changing to the work is done for me. So when I say I do the work, what I mean by that is historically, there's an expectation that I need to click through, I need to read content, I need to digest content, make decisions from that. Whereas what is now the expectation is that is all done for me, that there's an immediate on-demand expertise that can be provided to me with far greater understanding of the context, the specifics of that, and that fundamentally that work will be done for me. And this is really, really impacting behavior of our users. And a really kind of simple illustration of that is just query length. So the average query length in Google is 2 to 8 words. The average query length in ChatGPT is 10 to 50 words. And it's not just around length, it's really around the complexity of that as well. And that's kind of adapting our interactions. And one thing I'd really kind of encourage you all to focus on is the maturity of these technologies. So if we think about search engines, they've been around for a long time. And all of us here, and all of our users, all of our audiences, are highly, highly trained, highly adept at using that technology. So effectively, we know how to get the information we want from that technology. And what that plays out in is often quite predictable behaviors. And we think around user behavior, often when we think around user behavior in search engines, what we're talking about is query behavior and search volumes and what are our audience actually searching for to get our products, to get our services. And we see commonalities. So if we think about research intent, there's commonality of modifiers. What is, how does, how to. And we can create content structures to directly reflect that intent using blogs, for example. If we look at that evaluative intent, maybe that modifier is now compare or best, but again, predictable. And again, it makes it easy for us marketeers as to how we can structure content, how we can directly address that intent with things like guides or listicles. And that follows right through to kind of more commercial intent with size modifiers, material modifiers, color modifiers, with nice category structures, subcategory structures, PLPs, et cetera, to kind of, again, directly address that intent, and then through to transactional intent with more brand or product keywords. This differs significantly in LLMs. And again, I'd just reinforce that one of the really core differences here is the maturity of that technology. This technology is in its infancy, and our audiences have far, far greater variance of competency with that technology. So some of your audience, they may already use LLMs a lot. They might already understand how to structure a prompt to surface that information they want from that LLM. But a lot of our users won't. And that's going to mean that those prompts are far, far more varied. What it also means, though, is alongside that kind of infancy and that, I suppose, lower competence of that technology, is that our audiences will surface more complexity in those queries around the specifics, the exclusions, what they actually want to be provided as an answer. And often what we'll see is we might have Kev, we might have Kay. They may want the same product, but their two queries could be entirely different. And there's no commonality in terms of how they're actually surfacing what they want in that query. But that's okay, because fundamentally LLMs understand what's being implied. And I just want to kind of unpick that for a moment for everyone in a bit more detail. So if we take this prompt, I'm looking for a new bike for my 14-year-old son. He's been riding for 5 years, and we're going to go to do some off-road biking together, where we may need to lift the bike over stiles and fences. I have a budget of £250 to £350, and we want to go and see the bike before purchase. So there's quite a lot going on there, but I'd say that is relatively typical of the complexity of the kind of behavior we're seeing in LLMs. Now, there's a few things I'd want you to think about what's going on there. The first is just generally how we interact with generative spaces. So as a prompt, I would say that's relatively research-led. But actually, and I have done this prompt myself in ChatGPT, in terms of the answer you'll receive, often what you'll start to see is very commercial or transactional information being surfaced back to that user, i.e. most of the citations are brand products. And this comes back to this methodology of the work is done for me and the expectations of that work being done for me. But I expect that I can put in what is a very complex research-based prompt and receive back something which basically will kind of circumnavigate that kind of whole intent process, which we're very used to thinking about as search marketeers. The second thing which is going on here is the information that LLMs are able to extract from that prompt. So you'll remember we spoke about it's a 14-year-old son. An LLM is able to understand that the implied intent here is around frame size. So what I'm looking for is a 26 to 27-inch frame. We were talking about in the prompt, I want to be able to lift that bike over stiles and fences. Again, that's not explicit intent, but there is implied intent of weight being a critical decision maker for this user. We spoke about wanting to ride that bike before purchase. We're showing intent that an omni-channel retailer is absolutely critical in this decision making for this user. So from what is quite a complex prompt with lots of implied intent, an LLM is actually being able to extract what is explicit and what are those drivers for that purchase. And that's where we need to start thinking about our product pages. So, historically, where we're trying to surface that research intent, we might think about guide content, blog content. No, we now really need to be thinking about what we're actually doing at a product level and a SKU level. So there's 3 ways I want you to think about how you can do that. And at the core of this is knowing your customer. So when we think about user behavior, we think about user behavior in search engines being something around keywords, search intent, query behavior. We need to flip that on its head, and this user behavior is more around decision making. What drives decisions? What do our customers, what do our users actually want? What do they actually need? And then almost forget about the prompt itself, because that's going to change from user to user. We all are individuals. We all have different wants. We all have different desires. If we can understand that, then we can understand how we need to prioritize and optimize. And to understand that, we can use a methodology called a FAB methodology. So that stands for feature, advantage, benefit. So a really simple example of this would be my iPhone. The feature is a 14-megapixel camera. The advantage of that is higher resolution photos. The benefit to that is being that I can capture moments with my loved ones in a better way. So something quite emotive. Let's apply that to the prompt we've been looking at. The feature is an aluminium frame. The advantage is weight. The benefit is I can lift that over fences and stiles. So what I've been able to do there is understand what the motivator is for my user and for my audience and apply that to a feature. And only then can we actually start to optimize once we understand what the priorities are for our audiences. So let's take a look at optimization. LLMs basically really thrive on signal organization. I mean, search engines do as well, so this is kind of not a new thing to focus on signal organization. And what I'm really kind of starting to talk about here is how we structure content and how we provide those structural cues to create semantic relationships between pieces of content and prioritize content. And if we can start to actually provide those structural cues to prioritize the features, to prioritize the things which we know are important to our audience, that improves an LLM's understanding to improve an answer, which we then deliver to our audience. Now that's all great, but what I would say is it's impossible to optimize your way out of bad sentiment. And I think truthfully, that's where the real winners are going to be as our search landscape evolves, is this kind of basically, if you've got a shit product, you ain't going to get anywhere. You need great products and services, and you need to be able to create good sentiment around those. And actually, where the focus is here is on operational signals. Now, we might kind of sit here and think, well, how do we kind of influence those things? I'm talking here around product innovation, product strategy, fulfillment strategies, all of the things your kind of product teams, your operation teams are delivering in your business. Those are the things which are ultimately going to primarily influence what is online feedback around your brand, around your products, around your services, which LLMs and search engines are then going to read, learn from, create opinion from, create perception around, which is then going to drive those AI outcomes. And I'd really kind of stress this to all of you today. This is not just around visibility. This is around having visibility which actually gives the right perception to your audience. That's very different to a search engine where we talk around like visibility. If you're ranking, you're ranking. Whereas here we're talking about, okay, we want our brand to be visible, and we want our brand to be visible with a particular perception. And operational signals are really key to drive that. So we actually started to do some research at IDHL to begin to understand this better. So what we did is we looked at around 50 topics, and we developed a tool which begins to look at what signals were driving visibility and sentiment around those topics, positive sentiment, not negative. And effectively what we found was it's really, really complicated. And when we looked at those analyses in isolation from topic to topic, it's kind of a bit of a head scratcher where we're like, well, it's kind of different all of the time like this. And that's no surprise, because when we think back to like, we need to put our customers and our audiences at the heart of this, if you think about a B2B service provider, what drives decision-making there is incredibly different to what drives decision-making for maybe like a B2C e-commerce provider. And we're going to see that those signals will be different based on our audience's needs. And you could even apply that to that B2B service provider. You know, they might have different product segments, different audience segments with very different buying behaviors. But what we did start to see was commonality. And this starts to really reinforce that importance of some of those operational signals, pricing strategy, product innovation being reoccurring themes of what is going to drive positive visibility and sentiment in generative search spaces. And you'll see the two biggest ones, which were most frequent in our analysis, brand authority and sentiment, and customer engagement. So i.e., what do your audience and your potential customers actually think about you? So there's a few things you can do to start influencing this. The first of these is your chief operating officer needs to be your friend. So when I started working in SEO about 15 years ago, we kind of all sat in a corner. We didn't really have to engage with too many stakeholders. Nobody really cared what we did as long as we were bringing the traffic in. And that kind of changed over time where increasingly we had to engage more and more stakeholders within our clients' businesses, if we're an in-house team, within our own business, whether that's brand stakeholders, PR stakeholders, et cetera, et cetera. And really, we've been actually engaging some of these teams for a while now. So, with a lot of our clients, we do a lot of work with customer service teams, with product teams already to inform things like EAT content strategies and FAQ content. So we want to know, okay, talk to that customer service team. What are customers saying to us? Let's then reflect that in things like FAQs. But this is going to become increasingly important. And what I would really encourage all of you to do is think about how you can make that a mutually beneficial relationship as well. So when we think back to some of the analysis we're doing here around using things like FAB methodologies to understand what actually drives decision-making, what actually drives purchase behavior, that's all information which we have as marketeers, which we can feed and share with our operations teams to begin to influence product innovation and product delivery strategies. And that is how we can start to actually influence operational strategy as marketeers. The second part I'd encourage you to think about is technology. I mean, this is evolving so fast, right? Like, even this week, we've had ChatGPT, Atlas has been released. A couple of weeks ago, obviously, had the Stripe and Etsy partnership around in-platform commerce and LLMs. So, this is constantly evolving. But I think finding agency partners, technology partners, who can really actually support you around the technology which is going to enable you to be visible is absolutely critical here. So, maybe a simple example of that, referencing back to Sarah's talks around reviews, right? Looking at who are your review providers, that's a bit of a simpler, more actionable thing than maybe a re-platform, for example. But then when you look at those technologies, how are we actually surfacing that within our owned media? How are we surfacing that within our owned media? What are we doing with those reviews? How can we optimize those further and use technology to drive that positive sentiment? And then that kind of leads into the third point, which is evolving earned media priorities. And if I'm honest, that's something you could sort of talk about for 20 minutes alone. But in summary, I think we're seeing an evolution from where our focus has been relevancy to a focus being on sentiment. And that needs to be reflected in your earned media tactics and your link acquisition tactics. And if you can do those three things where you influence operational strategy, you optimize technology, and you evolve your earned media priorities, you can begin to actually then drive that positive sentiment. So just to summarize, if there's three takeaways, don't worry about the prompt, worry about what your customer wants. Once you understand what your customer wants, provide those structural cues to relate and ultimately prioritize that content, and go and make your ops director a cup of tea. So we've actually got a stand here, so you can come out. Well, you can't have a cup of tea with me, actually. We have no tea on our stands. But we do have mugs, so I can give you an empty mug. So I'd love to chat with you all. I appreciate you all hanging on to listen before lunch as well, and thank you very much.
Monthly reporting making you want to shove sharp things up your nose? Try Dragon Metrics, the all-in-one SEO software with mind-blowing reporting tools.
DemandSphere. Limitless visual insights from the SERPs. Unlimited dashboards and users. Easy to use and easy to scale your growth to new levels.
You've got two blind spots, keyword rankings and LLM visibility. Now, most tools solve one, but AccuRanker solves both. See how at booth number 18.
Wait, before you go, want to stay on track with where search is heading? Download Search Pulse by Reflect Digital today. It's game-changing.